the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 20, the 2023 African Cup. This episode is part 2 on the players of Namibia, the final selections. Here we go. Hello and welcome back to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. We're back for part 2 of our mediacast on the players of the 2023 African Cup. This episode deals with the final selections of Namibia. In part 1, we compiled a list of players and their likelihood of reaching the final squad. That was based mostly on their participation over the past 2 years, but we did consider a few other factors as well. And actually, we ran out of time to do part 2 for some of the teams of the African Cup. So today we're going back to review that and to complete the collection, as it were. So the tournament has been played by this point, but we're going to take the perspective of just before the tournament here, as if we were doing the mediacast when we intended to. So this mediacast is divided into 3 sections. Section 1 is some preliminary information, including a look at the games just prior to the Cup. Then in Section 2, that's the main part of the mediacast, a review of the preliminary and final roster that was released, which we'll compare to the list that we compiled in Part 1. And then in Section 3, we'll summarize, reviewing surprise selections, non-selections, and new players, as well as updating on any injuries. And we'll end with a revised version of our Spotlight review. That's our predictions of who we think are going to be starters. All right, let's jump right in to Section 1 and some information about the squad. So teams were allowed to bring 27 players. That was initially 23 in mid-December, but they raised it to 27. However, Namibia just stuck with 23 players, it seems. So 23 players on their roster here. That was cut down from a 45-man preliminary squad. So basically, they had to cut 22 or just under half of those players on the preliminary squad. Let's take a look at the games that we'll focus on. We're not really interested in the results, but the lineups more. 2 World Cup qualifiers in November. So that was Equatorial Guinea. Sorry, I'm just getting the graphics straight here. Equatorial Guinea, and actually, as I said, we're not really interested in the results, but I got to say, this was an impressive 3-0 away win for Namibia. And then in the second game in November against a weaker team, Sao Tome and Principe, also away though, away wins always good in Africa, and they won 2-0 there. So off to a great start in World Cup qualifying is Namibia. All right, and in terms of friendlies, so this would be in January, just before the Cup. We have a game with Ghana, also a good result there, a 0-0 draw. And so again, Namibia looking good coming into this Cup. I'm just getting a bit messed up with my graphics here. There we go. 1 pre-tournament friendly. Okay, so we'll be looking at those 3 games, and hopefully it'll shed some insight on who we expect to be starters. As we said in Part 1, Namibia didn't have a lot of games to look at over the last 2 years, and then in November some starters we expected weren't used. We'll actually be looking at those games, so we will come back to that. Let's move on though to Section 2, the main part of the mediacast here, where we look at the candidates and see which ones made it to the final squad. Excuse me. Okay, well, we do have Colin Benjamin, the manager, and no change there, so we will call him a selection here. Colin Benjamin leading them through the Cup. On to the players and the goalkeepers. What we have left over from Part 1 is a definite candidate in Lloyd Kazapua, a likely candidate in Kamejanda Ndasiro. And then 2 possible candidates, Edward Mayova and Jonas Mateus. as well as the possible but unlikely candidate, Maximilian Mbaeva. So let's see who made it. Our definite candidate, Lloyd Kazapua, was selected for the final squad. Also, our likely candidate, Kamejanda Ndasiro, selected for the final squad. And just one of the two possible candidates was selected, Edward Mayova, but Jonas Mateos only making the preliminary squad there. And Maximilian Mbaeva not even selected for the preliminary squad. However, we did have one name added to the preliminary squad. That is Emmanuel. He didn't make the final cut, but it is perhaps a name that we will come up in the future. So there we have it. And let's take a look at the games that they played against Equatorial Guinea in November. It was Kazapua, so he was basically our nomination as a starting keeper. He also played the second game there in November. In the January warm-up, it was Ndasiro starting, so that puts a bit of doubt as to who the starter is going to be. We'll deal with that in section 3, but Ndasiro starting the game just before the cup there. Okay, let's move on to central defense, and actually not that many candidates here because teams usually bring 5 or 6, but we only have 5 candidates here. The first one is a definite candidate, Ananias Gebhardt, and we have 3 likely candidates in Denzel Hauseb, Kennedy Amutenya, and Ivan Kambaripa. And then one possible candidate, or one candidate at the possible level, Charles Hambira. So just those 5 central defenders. And actually, unsurprisingly, because there's such a few number, all 5 of them were selected for the squad. So definite candidate, Ananias Gebhardt. Likely candidates, Denzel Hassaweb, Kennedy Amutena, and Ivan Kambaripa. I'm just trying to catch up with the video here, the graphics. And finally, possible candidate Charles Hanriba, all 5 of them selected. Let's see if we have any new candidates before we look. Yes, we have one new candidate, but only made the preliminary squad. So perhaps someone to keep in mind for the future. We'll name check him here. It's Mutuenzu Given. And actually, he has played so little for the team that we don't even know which part of defense he plays in. He's just generally listed as a defender. Okay, and actually, no, we do have one other making up the numbers. We did have him in the soccer files. He was at the seemingly off the squad level, so we didn't add him to the list. But now we have to because he made the final squad, and that is Lubeni Hokongu. So that is one of the surprises that we will look at in section 3. Probably just a substitute, but I will just say his first and only appearance, Hokongu, was for the, or at least for the senior team. It looks like he played perhaps in the COSAFO Cup before, but he got 2 starts in November 2021 for the senior team, and that is the only participation he's had until his unexpected selection for the squad. So that looks more like the number that's usually brought 6 players there. Now let's take a look at the games and see who was starting in them. So it was Kennedy Amutenya alongside Ananias Gebhardt there in the first November game. In the second, Amutenya again, but it was Kambaripa there. And then in the January game against Ghana, Petrus, I believe he's a left back, or coded as a left back. We'll meet him soon. And Hanamub also a left back, both of them starting in the two-man central defense there. We do have Kennedy Amutenya starting as a left back in that game against Ghana. So he got 3 starts, so looks a bit more likely than he was in part 1, but a bit of a surprise there that Gebhardt only started 1 of the 3 games there, because we had considered him a very strong candidate as a starter. Okay, that is the central defense. In all 3 games, by the way, there, it was a 2-man central defense. And we move to the left back position and meet some of the players that we just mentioned. So Rian Hanamoob, or it could be Ryan Hanamoob, was a definite candidate over here. And we also had, well, we put Ananias Gebhardt in brackets here because he's actually coded as a left back. Over the last couple of years, he's been playing as a centre back, so we moved him there. But he is a possible starter over here on the left side. The other one is Aprochius Petras, so the other player who played central defence in that warm-up game. There. So Rian Hanamoob was selected for the final squad, and so was Apropius Petrus. And again, we have Gebhardt as a possible starter over here because he was selected. So 2 left backs making it to the final squad. And we'll just take a look at the left back position. In the first November game, it was Hanamoob. In the second, it was Gebhardt, so he started 2 games, not just the 1. In the third game, the warm-up, we already mentioned that central defender Kennedy Amutenya started as a left back there. So we do have plenty of candidates over here, but no kind of solid starter, kind of a different player every game over the last 3 games there. Okay, moving on to right back, we had no candidates at the definite level. At the possible level, at the likely level, we had Ryan Nyambe, and none at the possible level either. But possible but unlikely was Erasmus Ikieng. I'm not sure how to say it. Ikieng. His parents will probably phone me and give me hell for the way I'm saying it. And seemingly off the squad, the veteran Larry Horayab. So let's see who made it. Ryan Nyambe selected for the final squad there. And but the possible but unlikely candidate Erasmus I'm just going to say Erasmus. Just made the preliminary squad there, and Larry Horayab not selected even for the preliminary squad. So truly off the squad, that starter in the 2019 African Cup. Okay, so just 1 candidate over here. Let's see how they lined up. It was Kambaripa, the central defender, playing there in the first game in November, and in the second game it would be who we expected, Ryan Nyambe. And against Ghana in the January game, also Ryan Nyambe there. So it does look like central defenders would provide the cover if Nyambe is not the starter there. Okay, that completes the defense, except we did have 1 general defender at the possible but unlikely level, and that was Brendan Niebeb. And he was not selected even for the preliminary squad. So we're ready to move on to midfielders. And it was pretty thin at the defensive midfield level, just 2 candidates, the first at the possible level, so no likely or definite ones, but Dynamo Fredericks at the possible level was there. And then at the possible but unlikely level, Devin Somseb. Actually, Dynamo Fredericks was not selected even for the preliminary squad, whereas Devin Somseb was selected, but only for the preliminary squad. Unsurprisingly, we have a couple of new candidates here. However, they only made it to the preliminary squad. That is Moses Shidolo and Chipe Karuombe. So both of those, again, perhaps candidates that will come up in the future, but only making the preliminary squad this time. So no defensive midfielders making the squad, but we do have quite a few central midfielders before we look at the games. So again, here, none at the definite level, but we have Marcel Papama at the likely level, and then 3 possible candidates: Ngiro Katua, Romeo Kasume, and Ilago Simon. And then 2 possible but unlikely candidates in Paulus Amutenya and Stephen Jr. Damaseb. We had a seemingly off-the-squad player in Manfred Stark. I'm not sure why he was on, but we'll come to that. We also have a couple of new candidates to deal with too. But let's go over the players we've got on our list here. The first one, Marcel Papama, the likely candidate, was selected for the squad. Only one of the 3 possible level candidates made it, and that was Ngiro Katua. The other 2, Romeo Kasume and Ilago Simon, or Simon possibly, only making it to the preliminary squad, those 2. But a lot of other players making it to the preliminary squad too. Both of our possible but unlikely candidates, Paulus Amutenya and Stephen Jr. Damaseb, both making the preliminary squad there. Our seemingly off the squad, Manfred Stark, did not make the preliminary squad, but I believe we mentioned in part 1 the captain of the team for the 2019 African Cup, Ronald Keitiger, and he was selected for the preliminary squad here. The last time he had appeared was in the 2019 African Cup, so I think we took him off the list because he hadn't appeared all that time. But there he is on the preliminary squad, at least. However, age-wise, I don't think he will be around for the next Cup. There. Okay, two new candidates. One is Edmund Kambanda, and he appeared on the preliminary squad, but not selected for the final squad. And then another one who we'll add here is actually just coded as a general midfielder. We don't know enough about him to specify further than that, but it was Lawrence Doazeb, named to the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. So really a very thin central midfield there. We're obviously going to have players coming in out of position because we only have 2 candidates actually selected for the final squad. That's Marcel Papama and Ngiro Katua. All of the other ones just making the preliminary squad. So let's take a look at the games and see who they're going to choose. Well, the formation for the first game against Equatorial Guinea was a 4-1-4-1 formation, and it was actually left back Petras there. I'll just go back and look at his name here. Aprocius Petras started as the stopper in that 4-1-4-1, so that's more of a defensive midfielder role. All of the other players in the midfield there are players we're going to meet later on, so more attacking midfielders making up the numbers there. In the second game, we also see Aprocius Petras in the center of a 3-man midfield. That's a 4-3-3 formation, and we have Hanamoob. I believe he was right back there, Hanamoob. No, he is a left back. Hanamoob playing as a right midfielder, and then again it's just more attacking players who we'll come back to later. So against Ghana, we have the newcomer Hao Congo, the player who is seemingly off the squad, playing at the center of the 3-man midfield, a 4-3-3 formation there too. Or also, and Hao Congo playing there, and again that's the only one of the candidates we've looked at so far there. So we'll be coming back to this with more attacking midfielders. So very confused as to the central midfield here. But it does look like left back Petrus seems the main consideration, at least in these games. Okay, we're going on to the attacking midfield end of the field. So we begin on the left side, and this covers left wingers, left attacking midfielders, and left forwards. We do have a 4-3-3 formation twice here, so it'll be a left forward. Having introduced all of that, I realize we have to we have a candidate coded as a left midfielder that we have to deal with. So let's deal with that before we move up to the left upper quadrant of the field. Prince Chueza. My God, I had a lot of trouble with that. Prince Chueza, actually kind of an exciting youngster. There's a lot of buzz around him, and he was a definite candidate here as a left midfielder and was selected for the final squad. We'll take a look and see if he showed up on the field. On the right midfield, we only had a candidate seemingly off the squad. That's Willie Stefanus. He was part of the squad for the African Cup in 2019. And did play up until June 2022, but not selected even for the preliminary squad. So we'll just take a look at the games to see if Prince Tijueza shows up. And I don't see him in the first November game. In the second game in November, though, he played as a right forward in a 4-3-3 formation. And against Ghana in January, he plays as the center forward in a 4-3-3 formation. So next time around, we may have to recode him because he seems to be anything but a left midfielder here. Okay, so that's now we really do go on to the upper left quadrant of the field. And we only had one candidate here, actually, and that was at the definite level. It's Dion Hoto, sometimes called Dion Kavenji. Dion Hoto, I believe, more commonly used. And he was selected for the final squad, unsurprisingly. And we'll take a look at that position right away here. He did play in the first game there in November as a left attacking winger in a 4-1-4-1 formation. In the second game, he was the left forward in the 4-3-3 formation, and he also shows up on the field in the January friendly. However, he shows up as a right forward in that game. So Dion Hoto starting all three games there. Let's move over to the the right upper quadrant of the field. Right wingers, right attacking midfielders, and right forwards. And here we have a definite candidate in Absalom Imbonda, and a possible candidate in Uaturo Kambato. And both of those made it to the final squad. So Absalom Imbonda and Uaturo Kambato, both in the cup. And we'll take a look at the games to see if either of these players showed up. So we did say in the we're going to see attacking midfielders in the midfield. So in the 4-1-4-1, we see Imbonda as the kind of the left central midfielder there. And against Sao Tome and Principe, he is not. Neither of them are starting. In the final game against Ghana, we have Imbonda playing as a left midfielder there, but in none of the games does Kambato get a start. Kambato, so more of a bench player. Okay, on to the forward line. We've put attacking midfielders as part of the forward line, just to organize things. And we have no definite candidate, but a likely candidate in Petrus Shitembi, and then a possible candidate in Edmar Ronaldo Kamatuka. So Petrus Shitembi was selected for the final squad, but Kamatuka only selected for the preliminary squad there. All right, and we'll go back to the games. Shitembi does start in the first game as a right central midfielder in the 4-1-4-1 formation, and as a left midfielder in the second November game against Sao Tome and Principe. And in the third game, Chitembe starts as a right midfielder in that 4-3-3 formation. So well, the attacking midfielder position is not really used in any of the games. So he seems more like a versatile midfielder with more of an attacking bend, Chitembe. Okay, now on to the next one. No players coded as secondary strikers. So we go directly to the last category of forwards. We have quite a few candidates here. At the definite level, we have Peter Shalulile as a definite candidate. Three likely candidates: Bethuel Museu, Elmo Kambindu, and Jocelyn Kamatuka. Two possible candidates: Wendell Rudath and Junior Petrus, and we have one possible but unlikely, and one seemingly off the squad. I won't throw too many names out here. I'll just deal with them as we go through it. We also have a couple of new candidates that we're going to add to the list. But going back to the top of the list, the definite candidate, Peter Shaluli, was selected for the final squad. And the first of the likely candidates, Bethuel Museu, also selected for the final squad. Elmo Kambindu, only selected for the preliminary squad there. But the third likely candidate, Jocelyn Kamatuka, did make the final selection. Among our possible candidates, Wendell Rudath was selected for the final squad, whereas Junior Petrus only made the preliminary squad. And now we'll go to the possible but unlikely candidate, Alpheus Levy, and he actually did make the preliminary squad, not the final squad. And even our seemingly off the squad. I thought we had removed him from the list, actually. Benson Shilongo, but he didn't make even the preliminary squad. However, we did have another player in the soccer files as a seemingly off the squad player. That's Isaskar Gurirab. He was part of the 2019 African Cup, but had last appeared in October 2021. So we hadn't put him on the list, but now we will, because he was selected for the preliminary squad, Isaskar Gurirab, just the preliminary squad there. And we have a couple of new candidates to add, but only making the preliminary squad: Erastus Kalula and Sem Ndeshipanda. That is a really long name. Sem Ndeshipanda Ndangwapo is the player's name. Let's not go near that again unless he comes up in the next African Cup, and hopefully I'll have a better grip on how to say his name. Okay, well, the last thing left to us here is to look at the forwards that were used, and it was Kambindu. So Elmo Kambindu in the first November game, playing as a sole forward in the 4-1-4-1 formation, but we saw that he didn't end up making the final squad. In the second game against Sao Tome and Principe, we have Museu as the centre forward in the three-man forward line, Hoto on the left and Jueza on the right there. And against Ghana, we saw that it was Prince Jueza as the centre forward, flanked by Hoto, and there we see Shalalule on the left side, playing as the left forward. So he gets onto the field once, Museu on once too. So pretty hard to decide which centre forward is going to be starting in the Cup. Okay, that brings us to the end of section 2, the look at the candidates. and the selection. So we'll begin part 3 just by summarizing some of the unexpected things there. So the only notable non-selection was the player who started the first game in November as a centre forward, Elmo Kambindu. And he was a notable non-selection because he had been a likely candidate. I checked for injury. He was not injured, so just simply not selected there. And then the surprise inclusion and actually getting a start in the January game was Lubeni Hakongo. And again, we had him as seemingly off the squad because he only had 2 starts in November 2021. So coming back from the cold into the final selection, Lubeni Hakongo. New players, well, we introduced a lot of new players there in Section 2, but none of them made the final squad. So no new players that were not on our list before. And we also have no notes for the injury update here. We don't have any players coded as injured. So that makes short work of that. So we move on to the last order of business in the in Section 3, the Spotlight Review. So we have the list that we prepared for Part 1, the Spotlight Review, based on our information there. We have some new information or more recent information that'll allow us to update it. So Benjamin Collin, we had effectively as a starter, the manager, and that remains the way it is. Goalkeeper, well, we had Lloyd Kazapua as a definite candidate, highlighted in green, but because he didn't start the January friendly against Ghana, that threw a little bit of doubt. And I personally think Kazapua will still be the starter, but we're going to change him down to blue, which more indicates potential starter, ranging from around likely, I suppose, and adding Kamajanda Ngasero, because he was the one who started the game. But as I said, I personally still favor Kazapua as a starter. In central defense, we were not really sure. We had Ananias Gebhardt and Kennedy Amutenya as potential starters. We didn't get much light shed on that, except Kennedy Amutenya starting out of position as a left back in that final friendly, and Gebhardt actually not starting at all. So we're a little less sure on this. We'd probably put Amutenya ahead of Gebhardt here, but Gebhardt is still a potential starter, we think. Okay, at left back we had Rian Hanamub as a definite, or we were confident he was going to start, so we put him in green. But now we're a little less confident, so we changed him to a potential starter in blue. And Aprochius Petrus, we actually put him in green as a definite starter, though not necessarily as a left back. He's been starting in the midfield or in central defense, anywhere but left back over this period. So we do think he's a definite starter because he appeared in all 3 games, but we're just not sure where Aprochius Petros will line up. At right back, we're still confident that Ryan Nyambe will be the starter, even though he didn't start the first November game there. He did start the next 2, and we had him as a definite starter at the end of part 1. Anyway, in the central midfield, we don't nominate anyone. In fact, none of the candidates we have are really convinced us. Actually, the top candidate was sorry, I'm just finding the name here. The top candidate was Papama, but he didn't show up at all in any of the 3 games, so we don't think it's going to be him. Again, we've mentioned Petrus there as a potential starter in the midfield. Aprosius Petrus, and then we've seen a lot of attacking midfielders kind of start even in the central midfield. So we actually think it'll be more attacking midfielders lining up there. So we're going to leave that blank, but we'll mention those attacking midfielders a bit later. On the left wing, we're confident it'll be Dion Hoto. Again, there is a chance that they'll move around a little bit up here, but we think Dion Hoto will be a starter. I don't know why I didn't have any highlight on his name at the end of part one, but I'm guessing I intended to put the green highlight for a definite, and that remains that's what we have him now as. Also unhighlighted was Absalom Imbonda. I'm not so sure we would have had him as a definite candidate, but definitely a potential starter there. So we'll put him in blue, Absalom Imbondi. Again, these players might be starting in the midfield. We're going to put Prince Chueza. Well, we had him as a central attacking midfield. He's actually been playing more as a forward, but we think he'll definitely be a starter. So we're going to actually just change this to a special mention category. We think Chueza will be a starter. We're just not sure where, but it's more likely as a forward than as a well, he's coded as a left midfielder, which seems to be wrong. But we had him as a central attacking midfielder before. So we'll just move him to the special mention category. And then forward, Peter Shalulile. We had him as a definite candidate, but we're going to hedge our bets here and put him as a potential starter. I would say a likely one, but not as confident in that as we were at the end of part one. So Peter Shalulile. The potential starting forward. Okay, so there's our revised list, and actually, because we are doing this media cast after the Cup, we can actually go back and look at game one and see who actually did line up as a starter. So normally we can't do that, but we'll take advantage of being able to do it here. So once again, Benjamin Collin, we'll call him a starter, the manager. And he is in charge taking them through the Cup. Goalkeeper, well, we changed Kazapua from definite to potential starter, but he was the starter as suspected, or as we expected. Lloyd Kazapua, the starting keeper there. And Ndasiro, probably the backup, we would guess. Central defense, we only had Gebhardt and Amutenya in blue as potential to likely starters. Gebhardt, though, not starting, so that was, well, not really a surprise because he didn't start the games in the lead up as much as we expected either, but not starting. However, Kennedy Amutenya, it's no surprise that he did start, even though we just had him in blue. So he starts in central defense. But the biggest surprise of all is the other central defender, Lubeni Haukongo. If you recall section 2, we had him as a candidate seemingly off the squad, but he started the January warm-up game in the central midfield. Now he starts this game alongside Amutenya in central defense, in the two-man central defense. So definitely a surprise there, how Congo really working his way up in the team there. Left back, Hanamu Brian was the starter. So we had reduced him to from a definite to a likely. But he was the starter. And Aprosius Petrus did start in the field, and he seems to be more of a defensive midfielder now. He started as a stopper in the 4-1-4-1 formation. So not as a left back that he's coded as, and who knows, by the time the next our next look at Namibia comes around, we may have recoded him as a defensive midfielder. Right back, no surprise, Ryan Nyambe. We had him as a we were confident he was going to be a starter, and he is. Upfield, the upper left quadrant of the field, it's a 4-1-4-1 formation, so this position here is an attacking winger. We expected Dion Hoto to be that starter, and indeed he was. On the right wing, so the right attacking forward, it is Absalon Imbondi. He does move around the field, but here he is playing in his coded position as a right winger. Central attacking midfield, well, the position is not really used, but players coded in that position did get their start. So Petrus Shitembi, and I'm seeing actually that we made a mistake there, because he should have been in our spotlight review in blue as a likely starter, but it looks like we forgot to put him on the list. Anyway, Petrus Shitembi was a starter in the central midfield there, alongside Prince Chijueza, who has been starting as a forward but is actually coded as a left midfielder. He kind of seems to be all over the field here, both of them starting in the central part of that 4-1-4-1 formation, central midfielders, basically. And then the forward in the starting game was Peter Shalulile, and we had him kind of potentially or likely as a starter, and indeed he was a starter. So there we have it. We've gone a bit further than we usually go in part 2 of our player media cast. We could tell you the starting lineup, and that's it. So we will see if Namibia makes it to the next cup. It seems to be about 50-50 for Namibia. That next cup will be in December 2025. We would like to thank Pixabay and Alexei Ivanov of Mappa Music for the wonderful background music accompanying this media cast.